Okay, so this is an addendum to my minimalism lecture. Uh, After I told my beautiful wife, Melissa, about my lecture, and of course she has a doctorate in music, um, I thought of some things that I forgot to talk about that are kind of important, fundamental even. And so she suggested that I do this addendum, which I'm going to do. Um, and these are sort of I gave you a kind of a historical rundown of where minimalism came from and a little bit of its impact on music theory and history since then. And I'm not getting any money from Sodalicious, although Sodalicious, give me a call. Um, so here's what I wanted to talk about. Two things. One of them is temporality. This is one aspect of minimalism that I think is very important. The other one is the binary of conflict and resolution, which and binaries in general, which I think minimalism attacks. So let's talk about the latter one, about this binary conflict resolution, or just conflict in general, which I was taught from a very early age is a necessary prerequisite to art. Basically, this is kind of the paradigm of Western art and expression, communication, etc. That there's some kind of conflict. And, we were all taught the different kinds of conflict that are present in stories and plays and movies, man versus nature, man versus man versus himself, etc. Of course, that would be, I don't know, human versus whatever. Anyway, and in music, it's manifest in many ways, but certainly in the concept of dissonance and consonance, or dissonance and resolution of dissonance. These are all binaries. And I remember thinking, well, gosh, are you sure there's no conceivable way to create art without conflict? Like, what would that look like? And whenever someone tells me that you have to do something a certain way, my mind just immediately goes to, oh, really? What? Now I want to know, test out, the opposite of what you're talking about. Again, maybe this is a type of conflict, but certainly the minimalists, I think that's one thing that unifies them, is this, I think, desire to create works of art that don't embody conflict, or that don't embody these binaries. I guess you could say they embody a duality, which might be indicative of, a spiritual origin that's different from the sort of Judeo-Christian origin, which with the eschatology, which is kind of characterizes certainly Christianity and Judaism and Islam, but with Eastern religion, Buddhism, Hinduism, that, again, this is a very sort of minimal assessment or description or whatever. This is not a religion or philosophy class, but the idea that dualities are embodied in a single entity rather than being two different entities that are duking it out. But I think, again, I talked about Satie and Cage being precursors or proto-minimalists, people that made minimalism possible. And then the real sort of lowercase minimalists would be Young and Riley, and then the uppercase minimalists would be Glass and Reich. But all of them, I think, their sort of spiritual aesthetic basis is no conflict. Conflict is not really part of what they're describing. And my good friend and Lamont Young scholar, Jeremy Grimshaw, has written a lot about Jung, and I've read his writings, and I've studied Jung's music and his utterances for many years, even before I met Jeremy. But my understanding of Jung's music and the way he conceives of it is that it's a sort of celestial music. It's like a gift from the beyond, that it's embodying or demonstrating something that's celestial or something that's divine in and of itself, and thus not subject to these dualities of conflict and resolution that we expect from most art forms. And I think he said, this music, he may have been referring to a specific piece. I'm just paraphrasing a memory that, well, this is what I want you to hear when you go to the beyond, when you enter heaven or whatever, is this music. And, well, that's, again, has nothing to do with conflict and resolution of conflict. The only conflict in a musical experience like that would be the conflict of having to, go through traffic to get to the concert, or to deal with whatever barriers are involved in participating in such a performance. Same thing again in the music of these other composers, which this idea of getting rid of conflict and resolution, getting rid of dissonance and consonance, explains the way that these pieces move. Again, Glass, Riley move very gradually, develop, if you can call it that, but change very gradually and inexorably. Jung's music doesn't act, some of it changes, some of it just doesn't change at all. But, without the aid of conflict and resolution, you don't have this striation that's evident in more traditional classical music, where you have, consonance, dissonance, cadences, phrases, etc. These are all marked off by dualities of consonance and dissonance. This leads us to the other question, which is temporalities. And I talked a little bit about the fact that a lot of these minimalist compositions are quite long in chronometric duration. Now, I say chronometric duration because I think certainly, I certainly believe, and I think these composers, if they don't, specifically preach this, I think they embody it in their work, that time as we experience it is in a chronometric way. You can kind of see there's a clock back there. Is a construct, a human construct, and that, but there also exists a temporality that's more divine in nature, which is often called eternity. And, again, we'd have to go to religious traditions and philosophical traditions, metaphysical traditions, to examine what time is, because time is one thing that I have to say science has been very they haven't figured it out. It's one of the trickiest problems, and maybe science is not the right mode of inquiry to understand time. Music might be better, actually. We all know this experience of having listened to a piece of music and having looking at a watch or clock and saying, wow, I didn't realize that much time went by, or that little time went by. You can see that musical experience is different in nature from other experience. My personal belief is that music is a sort of divinely gifted portal to an eternal experience of time. What our essence, our spirit, whatever you want to call it, has a recollection of. And of course, my religious tradition includes a pre-existence, a pre-mortal experience, and a afterlife. And so being in a temporality that's not linear, the way we experience it now, is more familiar to our inner self than this sort of workaday world. And so music is this wonderful portal into something of that eternal experience of time. And I think this is part of what's so, so powerful, so appealing about minimalist music, and as much as it is, and I think it is these are pieces that, of course, have to be experienced in their sort of longer duration. They're very gradual and very transparent development, if you can call it that. Again, development or change. It really forces us to experience this other temporality. This music, well, in foregrounds, I wrote this down. Foregrounds, the implicit property of music to alter our experience of time. So, again, those are the two things, really important underpinnings, I think, of minimalist music and how they've really altered where they're coming from and how they've altered our experience of music. I hope the proposing a foundation, I guess, of art making, music making that's not based on the binary of conflict and resolution, and then also proposing radical alterations of temporality. And I think I maybe mentioned in my lecture going to Einstein on the beach, 4.5, 5 hour piece, but not really feeling tired, not needing to take a break at all. It really demonstrably, this piece did alter my experience of time and everybody around me. I have to say, the place was sold out. Very few. I thought it was going to be empty by the time it was over, and nobody near me left before the piece was over. Anyway, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.